Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Great Shouts, marketing and webinars. I am your host, Ed Davidson. I'm a fractional head of marketing. Every fortnight, we come together with a specific B2B marketing topic. We have an expert in the community that does a deep dive for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we get to grill them with questions at the end. So feel free to put that in the chat and ask questions. And today we've got Anna Sandford-James, who's going to be talking about everything to do with the Jobs to be Done framework. So Anna, over to you. I think you should be able to share your screen. I will go on mute, and then I will have a discussion in the end.
Perfect. Okay. Can we see the slide deck?
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks so much for having me here today. Like Ed said, today I'm talking all about uncovering the real reasons why people buy. And this is based on the theory of jobs to be done. Before we start, I should probably introduce myself properly. I'm Anna. I'm a user research manager working at the Scale Up Collective. My background is in psychology, brand strategy, insight, and product strategy. And alongside my colleagues at the Scale Up, which two of them are here today, we help startups and early stage businesses unlock the audience insights that kind of give them the clarity and confidence that they need to understand and scale in their markets effectively. So in today's presentation, I'll try and keep it to 20 minutes. But the idea is I'm going to take you through one of the key approaches that we use for our audience research, which is the framework of jobs to be done, and using customer interviews to discover these jobs to be done, or what it is that customers are really looking for and why they'd buy a particular product and service in that moment. So the kind of agenda, first I'm going to sort of take you through what jobs to be done theory is and why it's important for us as marketers. Then I'm going to move on to talking about how we can effectively use customer interviews to uncover those jobs to be done. And then finally, I'll just touch on how we can turn all of those insights that we've discovered through interviews around those jobs to be done into messaging that resonates with exactly what it is that our customers are looking for, which is going to lead obviously to increased conversions. So first of all, what is jobs to be done? So you've probably heard the term flying around, and there are a few different interpretations and applications of jobs to be done. So I mean, if anybody does have their own understanding that they want to share, then feel free to sort of share that now.
The way I always see it is that it helps to truly cut to why people are taking action and why they're hiring a particular product or service. And I think it moves the kind of view of demographics out of the way and means that there's a whole range of people that might have a similar job to be done. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, exactly. You got it exactly right, Ed. So that's exactly why it was originally developed. So it was at first developed for product teams as opposed to marketing teams. And the reason behind it was to kind of move product teams away from focusing purely on customer attributes or, like you said, demographics, towards the real reasons that cause them to sort of seek out new products and services. But so that was in the 1990s, and since then it's gone through lots of evolution, and in the process marketers have realized that it's a great tool for us to be using to help us understand and then communicate the real value of our products to our audiences. So ultimately, jobs to be done is a framework for understanding the real motivations behind people's purchase decisions. And the theory kind of lies on top of this fundamental idea or principle that people don't just buy products and services, but what they're really doing is hiring them to make progress toward a desired outcome. So whether that's solving a problem or trying to conquer a challenge, seizing an opportunity, or trying to achieve a goal, people are actually only buying products and services to actually make progress with something. So I like to think of marketing as causing a switch from an old way or a painful current reality to a new way or a better reality. So if we think about it like that, the job is whatever it is, that painful reality, whatever it is that the customers are trying to get around or what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then the done part of that is the better life that they want for themselves, or how things change when they find the solution to that progress. And that's what they're going to be considering your solution to help them get to. So this is kind of the classic quote that's frequently associated when we talk about jobs to be done, and attributed to Theodore Levitt, who was a famous Harvard Business School marketing professor. He used to tell his students that people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. What they really want is a 1/4-inch hole. So the kind of importance of this quote really just emphasizes how if we turn our attention away from the drill, away from the solution, and towards the job, and the job to be done, which is the outcome, the whole, it's going to help us really understand what's going on in our customers' lives more, and really kind of get deep into what it is why they would hire our product. So if we turn our attention to the whole, we can start asking kind of more customer-centric questions. So we might want to ask, for example, why are they trying to drill a hole in the first place? Have they ever drilled a hole before? How have they done that? What other products do they consider to create that hole? And ultimately, how does their life change once they've drilled that perfect 1/4-inch hole? And if we don't ask those kind of questions about the outcome, then we don't really understand why the customer chooses to buy our product. So I just want to give you a quick B2B example of using jobs to be done. So Intercom are kind of avid users of the jobs to be done framework in their marketing. And then they've actually even published a book around their successes using this framework. But this example is called this is not a map example, and it kind of, using this example, we can kind of see how that quote that the customer rarely buys what the company think they're selling rings true. So Intercom used to have a map feature in their product that showed businesses, their customers, where their own customers were around the world. And Intercom's kind of product analytics showed that this map feature, was performing really well. But the marketing team found it was really difficult to promote. And that the reason why was because they didn't understand why exactly the customers were using it. And if it wasn't for the fact that Intercom had other features, such as a user list, which actually more accurately represented how many customers were in particular countries or cities, much better than the map did, they would have assumed that they should have been promoting the kind of geographical accuracy of this map and talking about that to the customers in terms of how it provides value. But because they had this user list, they knew that wasn't really why, it couldn't be why, or was likely not to be why that customers were using this feature or drawn to this feature. So they had to talk to their customers, and by speaking to their customers and asking them more about the specific situations that they were using their map, they soon realized that it wasn't just a map, it was actually a showpiece which was being used by businesses to impress people at a glance. So once they kind of figured that out, they were then able to kind of accurately communicate the value of the solution to the customers, and they were able to kind of optimize on that value. And as it turned out, a worse map did a better job for these customers. So why do marketers need to pay attention to jobs to be done? Well, hopefully we can see using jobs to be done, it helps us really understand what causes people to hire our particular product and why they like particular features. It also helps us better understand the real alternatives that we're competing against. And it also lets us speak, directly about the value that we provide in a way that resonates with what the customers are looking for. So yeah, once we start looking at our product through our customers' eyes and inquiring about the context in which they use it, products like ours, because it doesn't have to be our particular product, what in the context that they use it and the progress that they're trying to make, what they're trying to achieve, we quickly learn that it's not what our product does that's really value that matters most to the customers. It's actually the outcome that they want. So it's what they're trying to achieve. Yeah, and also kind of in addition to kind of focusing more on that progress and the context in which that progress or that need to make progress arises, we can learn much more about our customers than we can from focusing purely on the person themselves. So kind of a useful example of this, and it's not a B2B example, but imagine a sort of senior sales manager, lives in London, eats healthily, works out a lot, and any kind of other classic persona segmentation you can fill in. Well, he's hungry and he goes out to lunch, and there's two options. The first one is kind of a fitness food shop providing on the messaging, sort of providing all the macro and micronutrients he could need, but it seems as though it's going to take at least 20 minutes for him to get that. And then the other option is a quick supermarket meal deal. If we relied purely on our understanding of who he is, then we could confidently assume that he would choose the first option. And if he went for the meal deal, it would seem quite erratic and maybe irrational. But unless we really looked into the context of that decision, we wouldn't know that he's actually really so busy during the day that he only has 10 minutes to take lunch. And once we know that context of his decision, surrounding his decision, it's clear why he decided to hire the meal deal. So yeah, it's really clear kind of why it's so important for us as marketers to kind of dig deep into that context surrounding the decision to buy our product, because that's really ultimately what's determining why they choose to hire it. So hopefully that builds a bit of a picture of what jobs to be done are. And now I want to talk about how we can use interviews to identify customer jobs to be done. So interviews are generally the best way that you can discover your customers' jobs to be done, because they kind of give you the most opportunity to get kind of closest to your customers and dig as deep as you can into their perspectives for what kind of really matters to them and what's causing them to derive value from your product. You may have heard this sentiment from flying around, but I can say that basically some people assume that customers can't tell you what they want unless they've seen the product or kind of have a chance to try it out. But that's kind of flawed thinking. If we use the jobs to be done theory, we need to remember that there's a key distinction between the solution and the outcome that customers want. And although customers might not understand what's possible with different solutions, they do clearly understand their desired outcomes. They know what it is that they want to achieve. They know what that better life looks like for them. And this is particularly the case in B2B. You know, these people have a lot of knowledge, are highly kind of skilled, and therefore are very able to kind of articulate what it is that they're looking for. So when we think about using customer interviews, it's important that we focus our interviews purely on the desired outcome of the user, uncovering and learning about that desired progress that they're trying to make, rather than expecting them to kind of join us in that world of solutions. So some practical kind of tips of how to start setting these up. You know, first things first, we need to find the right people to talk to. And in order for us to kind of build a comprehensive understanding of our market, when I talk about market, the way I define a market is, as you said, Ed, it's a particular group of people who share a particular job to be done. But for us to build a kind of comprehensive picture of that, we should talk to people who have both used our product or service as well as those that haven't. So it's important to talk to people who are unfamiliar with our solution, because it's vital that we try and identify those alternatives that people are currently using to make that progress, because that's really going to help us deeply understand that painful reality, that struggle that they're currently in, and therefore that journey that we need to take them on to get them to that better life. But also we want to be talking to customers, and selecting the right customers is really important. It's best to prioritize customers who we know have derived some sort of value from the product, but also those who have recently started using it, so that they can remember both what life was like before they started using it, as well as be able to accurately kind of remember that decision process that they went through to hire the product. Also in a B2B environment, it's also important that we consider everybody involved in that decision process to hire a product. So it's often split to those people who influence the decision, those people that make that final purchase decision, as well as the people who are going to be using the product the most. And then in terms of how many people we want to talk to, with qualitative interviews like this, our aim is to identify patterns in the responses. So we can start to see patterns emerge with just 3 interviews, but ideally we start to see those patterns kind of reliably confirmed with 6 interviews. So interviewing 6 people from kind of each hypothesized audience segment, or each important part of that decision-making journey, is enough to start getting good insights. In terms of how to set it up, we find that one-to-one interviews work best, and you can hold those online. They work best because it means the participants, you know, have the opportunity to answer your questions directly, feel free to share their perspectives without the influence of others. But before we can hold them, we need to kind of reach out to them and get them to agree to talk to us. So contacting them using whatever method you feel works best, but it's always best to make it a personal email or message. The way to frame it is, you know, asking them honestly if they can help you out with your quest to kind of better understand their needs and experiences, and really expressing your kind of interest in learning what matters most to them. And also, in order to, you know, sweeten the deal and get people to spare their kind of their time, we can offer compensation. So it usually offer something around the value of £20 for 30 minutes of somebody's time. In terms of the kind of time frame that you're kind of asking for, ideally you'd have like an hour, so you could go into so much detail, but it's really hard to get people to agree to that. So 30 to 40 minutes is enough to get the details that you need. The way that we organize the recruitment is either sending a scheduling link, so something like Calendly, in the email, so that participants can kind of directly book a time that's convenient for both of you. Or if you're worried that you're going to get an influx of participants, and you won't be able to have the time or capacity to speak to all of them, you can ask them to reply to you, like sounds good, and then send over the link for them to book in. It is super important that you use a software that can record the interview or transcribe, and transcribing is ideal so that you can capture the exact language that people are using. And you don't want to be taking notes during the interview, because you want to be focusing on kind of actively listening to all the details that they are giving you. So that's the kind of practicalities. But more importantly, we need to know what questions to be asking. So
Anna, just a time check. It's 23 minutes past.
Oh, okay.
Just keen to ask questions if we can.
That's
so
fine. Yeah.
a couple of minutes and then ask
This
questions.
is fine. I'll just
No
kind
worries.
of just quickly run through the kind of questions to be asking.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, it's really important to ask the right questions. So thinking again about how I talked about marketing as causing a switch from an old way or painful current reality to a better new way, it's best if we kind of think about it as a journey or timeline that the person went through. So we are trying to learn what happened in their lives to trigger them to look for a new way. We're also trying to, dig deep into that struggle or the events that kind of push them to seek out new solutions. And we're also then looking at, how did they look for these solutions? What are the channels that they went down? Where did they search? As well as really understanding those key forces in the decision process. So what is it that kind of pulled people towards a particular solution? What kind of caught their attention? What hesitations or concerns did they have? And what gave them confidence in the end that they'd chosen the right decision? And then finally, the kind of golden question is diving into, what it is that they're ultimately trying to achieve with their decision to use a particular product. So using questions around, how did your life change? What's the thing that you can do now that you couldn't before? That's that definition of done that we're trying to uncover, because that's the kind of what customers need to see reflected in our messaging in order to kind of give them confidence that our product or service is going to get them to where they need to be. Yeah, so I'll stop there and answer any questions.
It's tough, isn't it? The 15 to 20 minutes. It's a condensed amount of time. There's amazing content in there, and yeah, I think it's such an important framework to use. I suppose I'd kick it off with: is there any frameworks that you think complement this? Like, do you tend to use like jobs to be done with like the value proposition canvas in terms of like the outcomes that you have from it? Or do you tend to use it kind of specifically with messaging, something you mentioned before?
Yeah, so I think one thing I didn't mention in this, which is really useful, I did talk about how we want to be using interviews to dive into that decision process. And a framework that works really well to help us understand and kind of contextualize and structure those insights is something called customer forces. So the kind of 4 forces or customer forces framework. And it basically helps us, and it kind of hypothesizes that whenever somebody is considering switching to a particular product or solution, there's these 4 forces at play. There's a kind of push of the struggle that they're facing, and then there's the pull of the new solution. So those attributes of particular solutions that catch their attention and make them feel that give them confidence that they're going to achieve their outcome. But then there's also 2 forces that could prevent them from switching to a new solution. First of those is, like I mentioned, those anxieties or concerns that might spring up when they see a solution. And then the second one, which is kind of often most neglected, is actually inertia. So a question to kind of dig into that is, what's the hardest part of switching? What was the hardest part of switching for you? We're trying to really understand the habits that we're trying to break. So often the biggest competitor is actually, personal workarounds or, the status quo. So it's really important we think about all of those four forces as well as the job to be done.
Makes sense. I suppose it does, like, especially a B2B context, like you mentioned it there, like the decision-making unit. So there's a number of different people that may have different jobs to be done that is kind of answered by the product or service. And, kind of classic sales and marketing technique where you're kind of multi-threading through different influences within the company to be able to get the sale over the line, especially if it's enterprise. Do you try and kind of have like that kind of Venn diagram where you're matching jobs to be done of those different influences within that decision-making unit to help them to make a decision or to influence marketing and sales?
Yeah, definitely. So jobs to be done is really useful for to enable us to create those targeted messages, so we know exactly what it is that matters most to each of those different groups of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose it's so tough to do it sometimes, especially with kind of timing and stuff. But I think that when I've seen like the origination of jobs to be done, and that classic example where he's there observing people, and it's like the milkshake, which is the jobs to be done because it keeps them full, but it doesn't fall over. And he's observing it. I don't know if it's like a fast food restaurant or something. Is there any way that you can observe people in terms of what they do, or listen in to calls and hear the context rather than questions? Because sometimes, especially with like qual, there's always that question around, are people answering in a particular way? Does it really get to the root cause outside of the way they're presenting information? Is there any way you can do that at all?
I think definitely. I think in the intercom example that I shared as well, one of the methods that they did use was a bit of social listening. So they mined sort of Twitter for mentions of the particular feature, and they could kind of connect the dots in terms of how the product was being used. And it was often at conferences or meetings, etc. So it's definitely a good method to be using. And there's also, just generally kind of looking at what's being spoken about most, and sort of the biggest problems that are coming up in your particular industry. So kind of looking at what is the most kind of underserved need, what questions are not being answered at the moment.
And can you, that's that kind of classic around what you said about alternatives, right? So either people are bodging their way through by hacking other things, or they've got a classic alternative, which might not be a direct competitor, but might be, something else. I mean, the comparison would be a sandwich versus a smoothie or kind of drink in that way. You are kind of always thinking about like those direct competitors and indirect competitors to tailor messaging and tailor value proposition as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's super important that we're, like I said, with those customer forces as well. It's really important to consider those, the habits that people are in. But yeah, definitely always looking outside of the category as well to what else could kind of get them to that alternative outcome, so that desired outcome. Yeah, I think I can't think of a direct example, but for example, with like pensions, for example, often people would think purely about comparing different pension providers, but a lot of the time, actually, people who consider taking out a private pension, what they're actually weighing it up against is whether they could pay off their mortgage. They should focus on paying off their mortgage.
Yeah.
So that's an alternative that you need to address in your messaging, and to effectively kind of get people to switch to paying for the private pension.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. We are at time. Thank you so much, Anna. I know that time goes really quickly, but we try and keep that 30 minutes. Great to see you. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you everyone attending. I love the fact we've got these AI people attending now as well on behalf of the real people. So see you again in another fortnight. All right. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.